Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Cognizant Classic Initial Research Show. If you are unfamiliar with the Cognizant Classic, do not worry. It is formerly known as the Honda Classic. So we are at the same golf course, the PGA National in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. I had to check just to make sure I had that correct. But no worries if you are not familiar with the Cognizant Classic. Just a new sponsor, the same course, although it has changed a little bit as my voice went out. It has changed a little bit. But I have a couple of shout outs to begin this evening. First off, congratulations to my friend Dave, who had a top 10 wager on Stefan Jaeger. That comes through for you. But the big winner of the week was Micah, who reached out to me, let me know that he had albeit small, but a small pre-tourney wager on Jake Knapp. He also let me know that he had what was described as a few top 10s and top 20s that hit as well. So congratulations to Micah, especially for the big hit on Jake Knapp, or at least the hit of the winner, Jake Knapp. Congratulations to both you and Dave. And if you had success, reach out to me in chat this evening on social media. Would love to be able to shout out other members of the community who have success week in and week out. For yours truly, a very disappointing Mexico Open. Came into the week fairly confident, especially riding the high of Hideki Matsuyama at the Genesis and all the DFS success. DFS was not a total failure. It was certainly a losing week, but I did have enough Stefan Jaeger. I did mention Sami Valimaki, who played extremely well. Cameron Champ was on the fringes of contending before shooting even par on Sunday, kind of falling back outside the top 20. Of course, was really high on Finau, who I believe top 15. So I had some good plays. I had some not so good plays, as in Nate Lashley, Callum Tarrant, and whatnot. A little bit unfortunate with the cut line going to -2 at the very end. Else I would have had a few more 6-6 lineups. So we're going to try to get back on track this week for the Cognizant Classic, a course that is very well known on the PGA Tour. But I just wanted to make sure I gave proper shout outs to those who won in the community. But as I mentioned, we're here for the Cognizant Classic, so let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where I post research every week on the PGA Tour. That'll come out tomorrow afternoon, absolutely, around the pattern of winners at PGA National and the players who fit that criteria that are in the field this week. There have been a couple of field changes, but that research comes out every Monday afternoon. So if you want to see that, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contests that I play. So if you want to see those pieces of information, give me a follow over at X as well. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to get you prepared for the week at hand. Much like myself, it sounds like he had a pretty poor showing this week after an astounding week at the Genesis. But throughout the week, he updates you with the course history, recent form, and things of that nature in his own way. And if you are a subscriber to his article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday evening as we continue the DFS talk after calls. So you definitely don't want to miss that. We had a pretty lively discussion this past week, led to, at least for myself, having a decent amount of lack of exposure to Taylor Pendrith, even though I was pretty high on him during the show. I got talked off of him a little bit throughout the chat in his Substack chat. So I'm gracious to Gabe for hosting me over there, and I highly suggest you join us over there every Wednesday evening. Then lastly, we are live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. Again, if you had success, whether you had Jake Knapp outright or some top 5s, top 10s, want to hear about that success. And then moving forward to the Cognizant Classic, formerly known as the Honda. What kind of players do you think are going to play well? How much do you know of the course? So would love the interaction on that front. But let's do our initial research for the 2024 Cognizant Classic. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. Good evening, Joey. Thanks for jumping in chat. Glad you could make it this evening. I know it's kind of late for you, considering the amount of munchkins you have running around. But no worries. Just appreciate that you're able to catch the show, whether that's live or afterwards. Hopefully you had a successful Mexico Open, or at least much more successful than I did. My DFS wasn't an abject failure, but certainly was a losing proposition this week. Stefan Jaeger had an outside chance today. Played well, but it was going to be really, really tough to catch Jake Knapp and Valimaki for that matter. But good to see you this evening, and hopefully we're going to turn, or at least for me, turn the luck around this week in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, for the Cognizant Classic, formerly known, oh, that's a little too big, formerly known as the Honda. Changed sponsorships this year. The Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches. You see Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. This is the beginning of the Florida swing, as is custom on the PGA Tour. Generally, we have several events out west, particularly California, Arizona, of course, the beginning of the season in Hawaii. But then there becomes a point around, the first week of March, sometimes the last week of February, just depending on how the schedule falls, where, we got an itch, where we go to the Florida swing. And this is the first of 4 events in a row in the state of Florida. So the first being the Cognizant Classic at PGA National. Now, the course has went through some changes, so I'll make sure to cover that. But PGA National is originally a Tom and George Fazio design back in 1981. Most recently renovated by Jack Nicklaus in 2018. However, I do not think it was a significant renovation, enough to really note or change the course drastically. Let's see. Normally, or in the past, PGA National's played to a par 70. This has traditionally been one of the toughest courses on the PGA Tour because it was a fairly long par 70. They have converted the toughest hole at the course, and we'll get into this in Fantasy National, but they have converted one of the difficult par 4s into a par 5 this year, which makes it now a par 71. It did add a little bit of yardage. It only added about 20 to 30 yards in what I have seen. So if this were playing around 71-20 in terms of a par 70, that's still fairly long, and it just makes it difficult. Now this is a pretty average length to maybe even a little slightly shorter par 71. The stimp is where it gets you 12 on the stimp meter. That is fast. We have seen lightning here before. These greens are very, very fast, and we're going to start getting into some very fast and lightning greens in preparation for the Masters here in about a month and a half. The average green size, 7,000 square feet, much like what we just saw at Vedanta. It's a little bit larger than the average tour green, which sits at around 6,000 square feet. Not a whole lot of fairway, but the biggest thing with PGA National, 15 holes with water in play. There's just water looming seemingly everywhere around PGA National, and that adds to the difficulty of the course. We are on Tiff Eagle Bermuda greens, and I do believe I have the specific courses that are TIFF Eagle. Just very quickly, Bay Hill, the host of the Arnold Palmer, Kapalua, where we were at the Century Tournament Champions to begin the year. Of course, PGA National, Port Royal. We don't get any putting data from Port Royal. That's the host of the Bermuda Championship, generally held in the fall. But Port Royal has TIFF Eagle Bermuda. And then Sea Island, the host of the RSM, has TIFF Eagle Bermuda Green. So we'll make sure to be looking at TIFF Eagle Bermuda this week. Fairways are Celebration Bermuda. Again, I'm not an agronomist. I could not tell you the intricacies of difference between TIFF Eagle and Celebration Bermuda. To me, it's just Bermuda. And the rough is a ryegrass overseed, which is fairly common, but it's not kept thick. It's only 2 to maybe 2.5 inches in length, which adds to the difficulty because since the rough is not long, it's not going to stop a lot of errant shots from going into said water. The biggest note that you need to make note of or remember throughout this week, hole number 10, traditionally one of the toughest holes here at PGA National, is going to be a par 5 this year. Also note, fairway lines were widened in May of 2023. All in all, 1 acre of fairway grass was added since last year, so a little bit wider fairways, just a tad. And then there's been a lot of emphasis on El Nino, a lot of rain, cloudy and cold in Palm Beach Gardens since the seemingly middle of December. Dropped 10 inches of rain on the course in about just under 2 months. So course is probably going to be pretty soft, would be my guess, which is going to make it play somewhat longer. But the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is that because this is now a par 71, hole 10, traditionally a very, very tough, long par 4, is now playing as a par 5. So there's a look at PGA National and the Cognizant Classic in terms of a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. Let's go ahead and move to Fantasy National. And I mentioned in the intro how there were a couple of field changes. From what I have seen so far, 2 players have withdrawn. Mackenzie Hughes and Ches Reavie have withdrawn or have decided not to play. There is one player that will not come up on the... I lied. Yeah, there he does. Chris Goddard received a sponsor's exemption, so he is in the field, and I am a fat liar. Filthy liar that I thought Goddard wasn't in here. So anyway, that make a note of that Mackenzie Hughes and Ches Reavie are not in the field this week. As we look at the last 36 rounds, we've got a pretty solid field here for the Cognizant Classic this week. And if I refer to it as the Honda, you'll have to bear with me. It's going to take some getting used to, I think. But we have Rory as the biggest name probably here this week. Rory, Minwoo Lee, Eric Van Rooyen, who had a very, very good Mexico Open, Russell Henley, Ryo Hitsatsune, Tom Kim, Tom Hoagie, Akshay Bhatia, Shane Lowry, Stephan Jaeger. There was Matt Fitzpatrick is also here, I believe. Could have sworn Fitzpatrick was here. Yep. So a few big names shaping up here or coming down here to Palm Beach Gardens for the Cognizant Classic. Not going to do anything too much just yet because I'd like to go to the course breakdown in Fantasy National. Again, remember this par 4 10th, traditionally the second toughest hole on the course, playing to a quarter of a shot over par. And you see it actually on the scorecard measures to 508. Now it is a par 5, I believe around 525 yards. that might be slightly off, but we are looking at a par 5 that is between 500 and 550 yards for the par 4 10th this year. So let's keep that in mind. But looking at PGA National from a scorecard view, first thing I like to do is go to the 9th and 10th most difficult holes to see where par falls and see how, generally speaking, how difficult the course is. You see 9th most difficult plays to 14 hundredths over par. In fact, just kind of looking, the 15th most difficult or 4th easiest hole barely plays under par. You've got a lot of big scores out here. In fact, you have to get to in between the 14th and 13th before you hit par. Just lots of bogeys around PGA National. The par 4 6th plays to more than a third of a shot over par. We're going to skip the 10th for obvious reasons. The 11th plays to a quarter of a shot. 2/10ths, almost a quarter of a shot. 2/10ths, just lots and lots of bogeys and even double bogeys. 7%, 9%, 7, 7.5. Lots of double bogeys out here just due to all of the water. And PGA National does have a little bit or a few forced layups. Now, there are a couple of scoring opportunities. I imagine the par 4 10th is going to become a scoring opportunity if it is playing, or now that it is, not if, it is playing as a par 5. That I imagine it will be drastically easier. The par 5 18th plays to about a quarter of a shot under par. Par 5 3rd plays to 4/10ths of a shot under par. So pretty easy par 5s, generally speaking. Not a whole lot of eagles, though, as you can see. 2.3 or almost 2.5. Just a little bit above a 1.5% eagle rate. Not a whole lot of eagles here. Generally, if you're getting a birdie on a hole, you're picking up some strokes on the field. Especially if it's especially if it's on something other than the par 5s. Just not a very easy course. The winning score, or the scores, are going to be drastically better this year, I think, thanks to the conversion of the par 4 10th being now a par 5. But there's still plenty of places where trouble lurks around PGA National. We move to strokes gained by shot type. Iron play is absolutely a big factor here with all the water in play, especially protecting greens. You're going to have to be very, very good with your irons. Putting, you would expect players that are finishing high up on the leaderboard are putting well. Off the tee, outweighing around the green by a decent amount. So slightly a ball striking course for your top 10s. Moving to the top 5s, it's going to get drastic in that regard. The approach really runs away from the putting. The off the tee really runs away from the around the green. And then for your winners, all about the irons. All about the irons. Almost 1 3/4 strokes gained per round per your winners. That's coming out to about 7 per tournament. So we're going to see some massive numbers tomorrow in the Data Dive show around strokes gained approach. The off the tee, also pretty big factor. Just being able to keep the ball in play. We're not going to be looking for distance as much this week, at least in my mind. And we're going to be much more looking for accuracy, but heavy emphasis in approach. We look at average strokes gained by hole by par. As you would probably expect with only a course traditionally or historically with 2 par 5s, they're kind of mitigated. It's all about the par 3s and the par 4s. Here at PGA National. Now, I imagine the par 5s might play a little bit more since there is now a 3rd par 5. Moving into the top 5s, a lot in par 3s. And then the par 5s, this is the, kind of the rarer occasions if players are getting eagles or they're just consistently birdieing the par 5s. But throughout the top 10s, top 5s, and winners, you've seen the par 3s are outweighing the par 4s, and until you get to the winners, the par 3s have been outweighing the par 5s as well. So the par 3s are just a big focal point here at PGA National, just like they were at Mexico. I was driving back from out of town this weekend, but I heard at least on the broadcast or the SiriusXM broadcast how Jake Knapp and Sammy Valimaki were number 1 and number 2. At least I think midway through the back 9, they were number 1 and number 2 in par 3 scoring, and that's why we had so much emphasis in par 3s last week. And it looks like we're going to be doing that again this week. So anyway, here's a look at your average strokes gained by shot type and hole by par. We move down to hole composition. We'll have to remember to remove this and put it into here. So your par 3s, fairly evenly split, but they're pretty long, and that's why they're going to carry so much weight, because longer par 3s generally are a problem or pretty difficult on the PGA Tour. So you got 2 from 175 to 200, and then 1 200 to 225, and 1 225 plus, an extremely long par 3. Very difficult. 226 plays to 15 hundredths over par, 14 hundredths over par, a quarter of a shot over par, 2/10 of a shot over par. So if you're making pars on these par 3s, you're going to be gaining some ground on the field. And that's why they're going to be carrying a whole lot of weight this week. No drivable par 4s, but 3 shorter ones. These are the holes that I had in mind when I was telling you that there are some forced layups around PGA National. Distance won't be a big thing this week. You're going to have a lot of precision. 4 each, from 400 to 450 and 450 to 5. And of course, as we've talked about numerous times already, but I will say it numerous times going forward tonight, this long par 4 has been converted now to a par 5. So you've got 2 par 5s from 500 to 550, 1 above 550. Moving into approach shot distribution, again, due to some of the forced layups here and just the fact that the players know that there is trouble everywhere around this course, they really, really focus on accuracy, leaving themselves with some longer irons coming in. You see 23%, 150 to 175, or exactly a quarter of your approach shots from 175 to 200. So longer irons, and again, we'll go into to the prior leaderboards tomorrow. Take a small look at it tonight. Mostly going to look at it tomorrow in terms of if any of these particular ranges matter the most. Historic cut line, you see it's been as high as +7 in the early 2010s, +6, but generally hovers in this +4 to +3 range. If the wind has really, really died down for the first 2 days, you could get to +1, which would actually signify average. But generally speaking, we're looking at a tough course here. Anywhere in this +4, +3 range is generally where it falls. Now, it has been +2 and +3 the past 2 or 3 years, but still tough. Still tough. I imagine this will come down a little bit. I would be more so expecting maybe +2 or +1, thanks to the conversion of that 10th hole going to a par 5. But there are, again, as we talked about, there are still plenty of high scores around here. More than a third of a shot, quarter of a shot, almost a quarter of a shot, 2/10. There are just a lot of tough holes around PGA National, and that is shown in this scoring distribution. 17% bogeys, only 15% birdies, and that doubles bar is rather large. 3% doubles, and that Eagles bar is absolutely non-existent. So a bunch of scores over par compared to under par, looking at a difficult course. Driving accuracy, even with all of the emphasis on accuracy, these still aren't the easiest fairways to hit. They have been widened slightly, but there's just trouble everywhere on this course. Not going to be easy to hit. The fairways, and especially the greens. even though the greens are large compared to the average PGA Tour green, you see that green in regulation percentage right at 60%, whereas it's 66% across the average tour event. Greens are just difficult to hit here. And scrambling percentage, also very tough. Players are not as successful scrambling here that they are at the average tour event. Again, a lot of that's probably due to the water and the fact that they're taking that penalty shot as opposed to just missing the green and having trouble around the green. It's more so due to the fact that they are having to take that penalty. 3 putts per round, less than the average tour event. Even though these greens are large, players are generally pretty familiar with Bermuda, and especially fast Bermuda. 3 putts per round aren't a huge deal here. And you see, again, even though the accuracy is less than the tour average, distance is drastically less. Distance just isn't going to be a big thing, I don't believe, this week. 273 here, 283 at the average tour event. Proximity, which is interesting because these greens are tough and they're large, but if you're actually hitting the green here, you're actually generally closer to the hole by about 1.5 feet. So interesting to note that. So there's a look at PGA National in terms of a scorecard and graphical visualization of it. We'll move back to the players in the field this week. I don't think I want to do anything with course length. I could see this playing somewhat close to 7,200 yards with that extension of, or the conversion of the par 4 10th. Again, the official scorecard has it listed at 7,147, which would, be a short course. It's probably going to play as a short course all 4 days, but I think it's going to be close enough to 7,200. I don't think I want to look at that. But even though that 10th is getting converted to a par 5, I still am going to believe that this is going to play pretty difficult. Maybe not as difficult historically, or as it historically has, but when rounds are difficult, our top players in the field this week, and I'll zoom in just a little bit here. Our top players have been Rory, Matt Fitzpatrick, Tom Kim, Denny McCarthy, Ricky Fowler, Justin Rose, Thomas Dietrich, Justin Suh, Sung Jae, and Shane Lowry. There's your top 10 in terms of total performance when rounds have been difficult. I'm going to have to zoom out just a little bit just to encompass the putting, but before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at approach. We saw just how important in the course breakdown that approach has been historically here at PGA National. So our top strokes gained approach players in the past 36 rounds or 12 months, whichever, those players have been Lucas Glover, Sam Ryder, Eric Cole, Tom Hoagie, Chris Kirk, Mark Hubbard, Justin Lauer, Corey Connors, Matthew Pavone, and Gary Woodland. Of course, skipping Chez Reavie has decided not to play after initially committing. Lastly, give me a moment here as I am going to look for specifically the TIFF Eagle Bermuda courses. So we are looking for, actually, you know what? I'm just going to bring in all records, make this easy. We need Bay Hill, host of the Arnold Palmer. We're going to go Plantation course at Kapalua, which has TIFF Eagle Bermuda. We have PGA National, Plantation course at Kapalua. Port Royal, I'll go ahead and click that. We don't get putting statistics there, but we'll go ahead and select that. And then Sea Island, I believe it's this top one, Plantation and Seaside. So we will grab those, apply the course filters. I want last 36 or in the last 2 years. So our top performers, and it's going to be somewhat of a smaller sample size, but just have to make do. Our top performers on TIFF Eagle Bermuda in the past 2 years has been Bo Hostler, Eric Cole, Tyler Duncan, Taylor Montgomery, Chris Kirk, our defending champion, Ben Taylor, Alex Noren, Chesson Hadley, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Dylan Wu. So there's a look at your top putters. But I would be much more so focused on the approach, as we saw from the course breakdown. So I would have a significant focus on these players here moving forward into perhaps some wagers or thinking about lineups moving into tomorrow, as approach is the key statistic by a significant margin here at PGA National. The only other thing we can look at perhaps is par 3 performance, since we saw in the course breakdown that they carried just such a significant amount of weight. And of course, starting tomorrow, we'll take a small look at it tonight, but starting tomorrow we'll really dig in and see if there's a range of par 3 we want to focus on. But just for tonight, we'll take a look at par 3s in general. Your top par 3 performers in the field this week: Justin Suh, Tom Hoge, Alex Noren, Rory, Luke List, Matthew Pavone, Grayson Sigg, Austin Eckroat, Padraig Harrington, and Tom Whitney are your top 10. Of course, skipping Chez Reavie, he's withdrawn. Before we go to the tournament history or strokes gained total tab, let's just take a quick look here at the historic conditions. Very, very rarely are you going to find a tournament where it is difficult. Now, you see last year, the weekend played to average because the wind really died down. But even for the cut, it was difficult. Majority of 2022 was difficult. All of 2021 and 2020 was difficult. Very rarely, in fact, you don't see a round classified as average. I would expect more so average than difficult, again with that conversion of the par 4 tenths to a par 5, but we're still not looking at an easy course by any means. Of course, we're on Bermuda. Fairways, kind of player dependent, whether they want to, how aggressive they want to be off the tees, but green speeds, fast to even lightning Bermuda, but we'll be looking at specific TIFF Eagle Bermuda performance throughout this week. That's what we just did. Now, Jack Nicklaus is getting credit as being the architect. He is the most recent renovator of PGA National, but again, this is originally a Tom and George Fazio design. Rough length kept average or even short. They want it like that to punish errant tee shots and go in the water. All right, let's go to the tournament history tab and performance here at the Cognizant Classic or PGA National. Let's see if I zoom in, does that? It cuts off 2019, but it's probably, well, you still can't see the name. So anyway, our strokes gained total leader here the past 5 years, Sepp Straka, winner 2 years ago, top 5 last year. He's also had a couple of decent performances. Shane Lowry has been very, very good here. Chris Kirk, our defending champion, much more success recently. Top 25 and then tied for 7th and then a win. Sungjae has won here in 2020. Keith Mitchell was your winner in 2019. I don't think 2021's winner is here, and it's escaping me who that is. So I'll have to cheat when we go to Microsoft Excel. But four of your past 5 champions are here. But Straka and Lowry, Kirk, Sungjae's played well. Daniel Berger, somebody to think about a lot this week. He has 2 top 5s and a middling finish. He generally really likes playing here at PGA National. Johnny Vegas, despite his off the tee game being his calling card, he's actually performed pretty darn well here, 5 for 5. Russell Henley has not played Cognizant or PGA National in the past 2 years, but has a lot of success a little bit further back. Some other notable names perhaps: Lucas Glover, 3 for 4. Mark Hubbard, 4 for 4. Nothing inside the top 10, but just pretty solid performances overall. Ben On has been pretty good here. Again, I mentioned Keith Mitchell. Eric Cole, only one time, but you see he was a runner-up. These are the kind of courses I would expect Eric Cole to be pretty good on shorter, difficult courses. Lee Hodges 2 for 2. So there's a look at the players who have played PGA National the best over the past 5 years. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not played them well. Camilo Villegas, I mean, he's 1 for 4 with a top 10, but the lowest in terms of strokes gained total. Now you can see it. So he has a top 10, but also 3 apparently horrendous missed cuts. Hayden Buckley has not been very good here. Eric Van Rooyen coming off a very solid Mexico Open. He's only 1 for 3 here. Peter Malnati. Doug Gim 0 for 3. Again, surprising considering the emphasis on iron play. But my guess is either the irons haven't been good here, or he's just not putt well enough to make cuts and play well here. Patty Harrington's only 1 for 4. Tom Hoagie 0 for 3. Moving on down, trying to get players who have played it, an amount of times other than once or twice. Luke List, another one of these premier ball strikers that it seems probably, at least my guess would be, they've not putt well here. Vincent Whaley 1 for 3. Chesson Hadley's 2 for 4, but on the wrong side of the strokes gained total. So there's a look at your worst performers the past 5 years in the field this week at PGA National. So that's a good segue. We're going to move to Microsoft Excel. We've been talking quite a bit about PGA National. Of course, this is going to play slightly different this year, particularly in the par 4s and par 5s with that conversion of the 10th. But we can still get a look and see how Honda has played over the years. And again, off the tee is just not a huge factor here. Just generally not a huge factor. It's all on the approach. Now, it's only saying 10%, but we saw just how drastic, at least for the winners, strokes gained approach was. I don't want to say misleading, but I think it's not emphasizing it enough how important strokes gained approach will be this week. Putting slightly higher than the full field average course on the PGA Tour, so we'll definitely have some putting. Look, distance, not a big deal, 34% less, which is a good change. Which is a good change considering New Mexico, we really emphasized it. Phoenix was an emphasis. Genesis was an emphasis. Of course, the Farmers is a big emphasis on distance. So a little different plan of attack now. Plan of attack for this week. We're going to be looking for maybe not even so much in the fairways. I'm thinking it's going to be good drives gained. I would have thought this fairways number was at least closer to average, if not above it. So be interesting to see in the prior leaderboards tomorrow. I'm thinking more so good drives gained would be my guess. But that's why we go through the prior leaderboards tomorrow in the Data Dive show to really hammer it out. Scoring, I would think it's all in the bogey avoidance, but look at this double bogey avoidance number 2. This might be a legitimate place where we look at double bogey avoidance because of all the water in play. So we'll take a look at that tomorrow as well in the Data Dive show. But we're definitely going to have some bogey avoidance, absolutely. Even though it's showing it's less than the average full field course, you see it's double the importance as the birdies gained. Moving to the par 3s, close to 10% more important. It looks like the range would be the 175 to 200 for now, but only 2 of the 4 par 3s fall to there. Remember, we have one par 3 that measures 226. We got another one that's in the 2 teens, so not sure I want to focus on just half of the par 4s. I think it's more so the totality of the par 4s. I've said par 4s, I'm sorry, par 3s, totality of the par 3s. Par 4s, slightly more important than the full field court PGA Tour average. The shorter ones look to be where you are gaining the most. Okay, so we have 3 in this range, 4 in this range, and remember we have now 4 in this range and none here. So 3, 4, and 4, they're pretty evenly split. My guess would be that we're going to look at totality of par 4s as well, but We shall see, especially tomorrow. And then par 5s. Again, with only 2 of them historically, they're going to get very mitigated. They might get a little bit more important this year, thanks to that conversion of having now 3 par 5s. And if there is a range, it does look like it's the 500 to 550, which has 2 of the 3 now. Okay, we'll have to see. I think they'll carry a little bit of extra weight, but you see, traditionally, they didn't really factor in at all. So, lots of par 3s, perhaps a specific range of par 4s and total par 4s. Lastly, I do want to check proximity because the majority of approach shots come in these 2 ranges. But again, you see, it's negative. This is why I'm fully transparent that proximity is my weakest golf analytics statistic. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me as a statistician. It's showing that the 125 to 150 has been the most important here, but the majority of approach shots come from this range, especially here. So we'll have to dig in tomorrow in the prior leaderboards. All right, we're going to end the show off as we always do, going to the early look file. This is performance at PGA National the last 5 years and where each player has accrued their statistics. Since this is I did not want to sort, I wanted to filter. Since this is a long-running course on the PGA Tour, year over year, I am going to limit it to players who have played it. I might keep 2 in there. At least played it a couple of times in the past 5 years to see what they have been doing well. And despite the fact that there's so much water in the course, which would, at least in my mind, make it think that this is a pretty volatile course, players might show great success in 1 year and then miss the cut and their performance be all over the place. This is pretty darn close in terms of correlation. We've got 28 players with at least a top 40. That's pretty strong. I think that's probably too many. We'll do top 35 tonight. This is still that's not 25 players. That's 17 players who have averaged a top 35 and played it multiple years. Surprisingly, not a single player is negative off the tee. My guess would be that they are finding a lot of the fairways. Sneak peek over here, seems like that's the case. So it appears that we don't want to fully ignore off the tee. As you can see, there are no negatives here in off the tee. It's just not been an astronomically high statistic, 2.7 being the highest. So these players aren't gaining a whole lot off the tee. They're just not hurting themselves off the tee. Approach, only 1 player negative, but we have some bigger numbers in here, absolutely. 5.8 from Gary Woodland, 4.8 from Russell Henley. Sam Ryder's a 3.5, 3.8. So this is a 2.4 of an average in the approach. 1.4. So even though not a single player is negative, the average is still less in the off the tee than it is the approach by a full shot. 2.4 here, 1.4 off the tee. Around the green doesn't look like it's going to carry anything much at all. Yeah, 0.4. And then putting, 1.5. So putting and off the tee look like they're roughly around equal. Maybe a little bit more emphasis in putting since we can narrow it down quite a bit on that with focus on Tiff Eagle Bermuda. But even in the putting, you got a few players that have not putt well here at all and still compete. Been on Matthew Neesmith, Bud Cauley a little bit less so. He's much more closer to field average, but still negative. So interesting to see that. Distance, yeah, it's what I would have thought. Just not a lot here. There's quite a few negatives. You do have a couple of bigger performances. Again, Johnny Vegas, that's what he is. He's just an off the tee preferred player. Gary Woodland, much known for his off the tee game, but this is a very, very small number in terms of average for the driving distance. I just don't foresee that being something that we want to focus on this week. I mentioned that I thought it would be good drives gained. There are a couple of negatives up here. 1.2, not a whole lot here in terms of good drives gained from Vegas, slightly under average. Hodge is under average, but you got some good performances in here. I think we're probably going to be looking at good drives gained, would be my guess, at least early on in our research this week. Greens, probably a little bit of the same. Not necessarily huge numbers into the negative unless you're looking at Bezadenhout, but probably looking at some greens maybe as well. But when I think of PGA National, I think good drives gained. Keep the ball in the fairway, hit your greens, and then go from there. Looking at scoring, as I mentioned, this is going to be a lot about the bogey avoidance. Just 4.4 is the highest, and look how heavy that green is compared to the 4.4 that's leading for Russell Henley. That's a little bit lighter of a shade of green. Not a single player negative in bogey avoidance who's averaged the top 35. That tells you everything you kind of need to know as well. Now, it's not to say that birdies aren't to be gained. Gary Woodland's gained them. Sam Ryder has gained them as well. But look at Russell Henley, much in favor of the bogey avoidance. Lee Hodges, much the same. Daniel Berger's been even. Shane Lowry, bogey avoidance. Yeah, just a lot in the bogey avoidance this week. Absolutely. Sepp Straka, a little bit of both, but still favoring the bogey avoidance. So we're looking at that, and then I will be interested tomorrow to see if there is a lot of separation, I guess is the term I want to use, in terms of double bogey avoidance. That could be something we want to look at. Moving into par 3s, 4s, and 5s. I'm surprised that these par 3s aren't bigger, but they are what they are. This is only a 0.8 in the par 3s. Par 4s are a 4.4. They've been played very, very well by the players who traditionally play the best here at PGA National, and then the par 5s is a 0.4. So again, I'm a little surprised to see that these numbers are so low. I do think these par 3s are going to have a pretty big impact because pars are good scores on these par 3s. The par 3s are quite a bit higher than the par 5s. 0.8 versus a 0.4 on the par 5s. So the par 3s are weighing more than the 5s. But a pretty heavy emphasis in these par 4s. Like the lowest number here is a 1.7, then it jumps to a 3.1. No particular range is really jumping off the page to me. Maybe the 175 to 200, which would back up statistically what we saw, at least against the full field course average on the PGA Tour. Moving to the par 4s, yeah, it kind of looks like the shorter two ranges. Now the par 4s, 450 to 5, have been much more consistent, but the higher numbers have been in these shorter par 4s. Interesting. Par 5s, they are just kind of what they are. Not going to carry a whole lot of weight this week. I do want to end the show off looking at procs. Again, the two ranges, most common approach shots come into these two lengths here. Let's see. Pretty good down here, but it's hit and miss. It's volatile for the players who have played it the best. So I don't know. I'll be again interested, curious to see what the prior leaderboards say tomorrow around proximity. But there's a look at some specific performance around PGA National the past 5 years. I'll bring back everybody in the field, sorted on at average finish. That's going to do it for the show this evening. Again, congratulations to Dave on your top 10 of Stefan Jaeger. Congratulations to Micah for your outright hit on Jake Knapp and what you deemed as a few top 10s and top 20s. So congratulations to you two. And again, if you had success, reach out to me on social media or in the comments of the show this evening. Would love to be able to shout out other members of the community who have success. For yours truly, we're going to try to turn it around. It was not a great, in fact, it wasn't really a good Mexico Open. It wasn't an abject failure or a disaster, but a couple things just didn't go my way. So we're going to try to turn that around for the Cognizant Classic this week. Quick reminder that as of right now, the DFS Tactics show will still be at 10 p.m., although I'm not entirely sure when the game, or my final wiffle ball game most likely. Final wiffle ball game is on Wednesday, so it could come back to 9 on Wednesday, so I will try to have that information for you all tomorrow in tomorrow's show, but I'll definitely have it on social media when the DFS Tactics show will be on Wednesday night. And speaking of social media, be on the lookout for the research that I do every week. That'll come out tomorrow around a pattern of former winners or former champions here at PGA National and the players who fit that criteria in the field this week. Thanks again for all the support. I appreciate it. For all of the wagers you made this past week for the Mexico Open, for all the DFS contests you played this past week for the Mexico Open, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.